You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a very fun episode of Ask Drone U. My name is Pablo.
My name's just Rob, and this is going to be a fun episode, you think? I think it's going to
be a good one.
It's going to kind of a tick you off kind of episode.
No, it might piss off some old geriatric surveyors, but I don't really care about that. By the way, I've got to define this really fast, Rob, because I have had multiple people in the last mapping class
they took it personally?
In Charleston who said, I better be careful. Paul may call me a geriatric. And I just want to clarify that being geriatric does not mean that you're old. It means that you've given up on life.
So I'd say by default,
you are extremely selfish, not considerate, and you are now living a life where you want everyone to wait on you and not live by the values and morals that you taught everyone, including your kids, to do while they were growing up. So I really think a geriatric is an old person who does not give an F about the world around them.
So by default, people that were at the class couldn't be geriatric because they're improving their lives, they're working on stuff, they're getting better.
Exactly, lifelong learners.
Right on.
They are supporters
I don't know if that is the definition of geriatric, but that is Paul's definition of geriatric.
I mean, geriatric typically, well, let's just find out.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Siri, what is geriatric?
Okay, check it out.
Geriatrics.
Why don't you read
Geriatric
it?
or geriatric medicine is a specialty that focuses on... Nope, that's not right. Define geriatric.
Okay, check it out.
Nope, it pretty much means old patients, is what she's saying, but that's not right.
It's not?
No, hold on, I can't close this down either. Long story short is, geriatrics is not, I don't think of old people as geriatrics. I think of old, mean-spirited people who are very selfish and not considerate of other people as geriatrics. Like people who have just given up. Okay, geriatric, the branch of medicine or social science dealing with health and care of old people. So even the fact of using geriatric as a verb is kind of more vernacular or slang, as you would say, jargon.
Okay.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about geriatrics.
Too late.
We're here to talk about industries that are disrupting other industries. And thanks to...
Other industries don't like that.
No, they don't. And if other industries had their say, like in New York, in the taxi industry, they're going to try to protect, and they will just end up losing because if you remember in previous episodes, what did I say about the law? It's not the law that matters, it's the law that society upholds. For example, it's the law to give out tickets for speeding, right? Chances of you getting a speeding ticket, rather high. Chances of you getting a ticket for being on your cell phone, pretty low. Now, if we go back into statistics from the, NTS8 National... No, it wasn't NTSB's report. It was someone else. It's like NHTSA. And they wrote that there are now more fatal accidents from distracted driving than speeding, drunk driving, and something else combined.
Which makes sense. I mean, if you think just about the numbers, right? The number of people that are texting and driving or being on their cell phones otherwise in driving, they could be on on a website for all we know. The numbers are significantly higher, at least I hope, and they are, than people that are drinking and driving, right? So,
and yet we're doing nothing about it because it's a societal norm to be constantly connected, and to punish people for that seems weird. So
I've actually got a couple friends that are police officers, and I've asked them, if you see somebody on text, what's the policy? And yeah.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day,
I thought it would be a definitive, I'm pulling that person over.
If I was a cop, every single person who I saw like this, like the lady who jumped in front of me at Chick-fil-A at lunch, who's just on her phone, you know, it was just like, I hate that stuff. I'm like, get off your phone. You are driving, as Josh would say, drive with a purpose.
Absolutely.
You have a mission at hand. Anyway, okay, let's beat it. Let's play the question, which is actually brought to you because of a conversation that happened in the commercial SUAS group on Facebook. And there was one particular guy who had an open investigation against him for drone mapping, of all things, from our favorite favorite state of UAS in the United States, the only state that has blatantly violated federal preemption and then tried issuing a court case against it and lost. Sucks to suck, North Carolina. I'm talking to you. Okay, I'm off the soapbox. So let's go ahead and play the question.
Afternoon coffee at its finest.
Pew!
Hi, Rob. Hi, Paul. Thanks for what you're doing. This is Michael Jones. I've called in before with a couple of questions, but I've recently had an investigation opened by the North Carolina Board of Surveying and Engineering. And after all the training and watching courses and money spent on courses and things like that, I've realized now that in North Carolina, you cannot stitch any pictures together. So you cannot only, you can't create maps, you can't stitch pictures together, you can't say you create maps, even if you have a disclaimer saying you're not a surveyor and that's not what it's for. You can't create it for documentation purposes, you can't create it for investors, stakeholders, anything. You can't use Drone Deploy or any other software to stitch it together. And I've even been told that you can't even work for another company and collect the pictures and send them to the company for the company to process. You can't even collect it without being a licensed surveyor. I myself think this is a bit overreaching. Cuts out a lot of my work for people who just want maps for documentation and progress reporting. So I was just wondering about your thoughts on that, and I don't know, just looking for some help. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the question. We appreciate the question. And I think you're actually a very nice person for you to say, I think that's a bit overreaching. It seems like it's much worse than that. It almost sounds, so I'm going to go to the other extreme. It almost sounds corrupt.
Are you surprised that a state who has blatantly violated federal preemption of law by enacting their own drone licensing and registration program that is strictly prohibited literally by the federal government of the United States of America, which, if I may add, they attempted to prosecute someone very recently and the case was thrown out of court? I can't stand old geriatric protective effers because they frankly are too afraid to change themselves. It is not my fault that you are too afraid to change, but let me tell you something. I will be the first to challenge you in everything you do in your industry and watch me succeed wildly. You know why? Because people who are willing to learn and willing to take on things that don't make sense will always end up winning. Anyway, okay, but let's talk about why this really matters. All right, so we did a couple things here. It sounds like you wanted to say something. I should probably shut up for a second, but I just want to say that I did do some research here. So Michael R. Jones went ahead and posted the actual regulations on the same thread. And there is nothing in there that stops him from drone mapping unless he provides a drone map with plot lines, survey markers, or boundary lines or property lines, and it's provided without a surveyor's license. Okay.
Well, so before you go further, let me clarify then, because he's calling and saying that he's been told by somebody from the state that he can't do this?
That he cannot stitch photos together, right? So let me ask you this, North Carolina. Have you ever taken a pano on your iPhone? I know it's crazy. It's a phone, but actually it's smart and you can use the internet on it. You can even ask it to do nominal tasks like book a calendar meeting. You should try it. It may make things more efficient over there. But on your phone, you can also do other great things like take a panorama.
You should try it.
A panorama, right? That's multiple photos, right? Looks really long and skinny, get really beautiful landscapes. A pano, right? Well, according to this investigator, every single person who's ever traveled to North Carolina is now guilty of a crime for stitching photos together, and it looks like Google Earth may be in trouble too. No, they're not.
Let me just submit something here. I don't want to rain on your soapbox parade.
Oh, I got way more where that came from.
We're having a lot of fun with this parade. And I know North Carolina has had some other issues, but I kind of hate using such a broad brush Say, like we're speaking to North Carolina when it was an
We're
investigator,
speaking to
right?
the North Carolina government. And I'm not calling out the investigator because
Well,
supposedly the
he's the one that should
investigator.
be called out.
I agree, but supposedly the guy was really gracious. And
Graciously wrong.
graciously wrong. But anyway, so this has been a big problem in California as well. But I've got news for you. California just recently changed their laws, and I have the documentation that I'm going to read on the show that kind of goes over the discussions that happened between RPLS or PLS, a licensed surveyor. Okay, we're just going licensed surveyors. So licensed surveyors and other people had very, very long discussions. They decided to change the law to negate any collection materials as to how surveys are collected. And I'm going to go over that. But I thought it was really interesting because there was a guy named Frazier who commented on this whole feed who says, wait a minute, I do mapping and surveying for an environmental consulting firm in North Carolina. A traditional licensed surveyor is never required for any part of our workflow or final deliverables, whether we generate it from imagery ourselves or pull it from satellite manned aircraft. We use total stations and GNS base stations regularly. He continues on, I don't know who you are dealing with, but they clearly seem to think a PLS firm has jurisdiction over GIS and the mapping science industries. Pro tip, they don't. Now, if you are trying to deliver something to a developer that ultimately makes decisions that traditionally requires a state licensed surveyor, you might get in trouble. I would agree with that.
As you should.
We have said in this podcast before, you cannot interpret the accuracy of your maps, but as we teach in our mapping classes, you need to provide your quality report to your licensed surveyors so they have all the data necessary to make those calls.
Right.
You're not ultimately making those calls. But going back to the question asker, he is just making maps for progression reporting purposes.
Ridiculous.
100% overreach. 100% overreach. So every surveyor, let me just put it to you this way. Every surveyor I've ever worked with, which now is about a dozen, I've never seen the licensed surveyor out in a field.
Yeah.
He has other lackeys, minions, friends, colleagues. Disney would call them cast members, but whatever they're called, they're out there pulling points with a total station, with a base station. They're out there checking these things, right? And the surveyors are essentially signing off on it, yes or no, I agree with this, right? So California really tried to go after a lot of people as well, but quickly became overwhelmed as a lot of people are doing drone mapping, which, by the way, Michael R. Jones, I just want to say, drone deploy, not your solution. I know Michael was actually a member about 2 years ago. Michael, I'd like to invite you back to Drone U to check out our new comprehensive mapping course, because I think it's something that would really benefit you, as we do discuss this in the course. So that being said, I did a little bit of research, internet, fiending, keyboard monster, whatever you want to call it. And I've got something I'd like to read to you, because it completely backs
Story
up
time.
what I'm saying. It's how California is changing what they're doing, and I think it's really important for everyone to hear. So this document from proceedings.esri.com, let me see. This is from, let's see. I guess this is more of an article about what they're doing. All right, so here we go. The task force debated at great length at the difference between a licensure of practice and the arbitrary control of the use of tools utilized in a practice. As it is true with many sophisticated techniques and technologies, a layperson and a licensed practitioner, let me say that one more time. As it is true with many sophisticated techniques and technologies, a layperson and a licensed practitioner may be able to accomplish what appear to be similar functions utilizing a common tool set, and often the purposes for those activities may appear to parallel each other at a high level. Historically, the guiding principle as to when an activity or function must be restricted to a licensed practice is when the public health, safety, or welfare is at stake. Thus, the GIS, LIS, so Geographical Information Systems, land-based information systems, related functions were carefully analyzed to determine whether practice restrictions should apply, not based simply upon the tool or technique used, but rather based upon the service, product, or advice delivered.
Interesting. And this is from North Carolina?
This is from California.
Oh, this is California.
But California has been doing the same thing that North Carolina was doing, so I thought this was a great parallel.
Okay.
Among the criteria the task force used to distinguish between the use of GIS technology for survey purposes versus use of GIS-based equipment and technologies for other lay purposes were the following. A distinction must be made in the use of electronic systems between making or documenting original measurements in the creation of survey products versus the copying, interpretation, or representation of those measurements in such systems. Number 2, a distinction must be made according to the intent, use, or purpose of measurement products in electronic systems to determine the definitive location versus the use of those products as a location reference for planning, infrastructure management, or just general information. GIS databases and maps prepared to be simply referential, representational, or diagrammatic portrayals of existing source documents should not automatically fall under the requirement for supervision by licensed professionals unless the use of the databases and/or maps are intended to serve as authoritative public records for geographic location. That's your key right there.
Yeah, that just public record in particular.
Exactly, which, I mean, you look, okay.
Doing progress reports for a construction company clearly will not fall into that category.
No. And here's the thing. The way that the law was written in California and the way, here it is, looking at the regulations of California and North Carolina, they're pretty similar. Now, that being said, based off of reading the law in North Carolina, there is nothing, in my opinion, I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV or the radio. You should be looking up your own legal advice. But the way that I see it and the way that I read it is that there is no reason he can't do drone mapping unless it's being used and interpreted as like plot line surveys, as these other things.
Where it would affect the public in some way.
Yes, and not only that, but I know of a surveying firm in North Carolina that has drone guides go out and map the areas, and they just do all the plot lines in-house and have the LS sign off on it. There are people other than just regular guys who are drone owners that are doing this.
But that's different because they are having an LS sign off on it, right?
Well, look, if I'm doing a survey for a surveyor, he's signing off on it.
I understand.
I'm not the one who is, signing off on it or interpreting it.
Correct. But that's not what Michael is talking about, if I understand correctly. So his question is, what should I do? What advice do you have? It seems as though to really protect yourself, you might want to talk to an attorney to interpret the actual laws and then know what you're dealing with, because that's going to suggest that you're safe to do what you need to do within the confines of what you've been describing, and then go about your business understanding you might have to defend yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it other than that's kind of the road that you're on, and then be willing to take that risk, which seems worth it.
If I understand you correctly, you were saying that if he's using a licensed surveyor to sign off on his stuff, he should be fine. And there's little risk.
No, I wasn't saying that at all. I was saying that he needs to get an interpretation of the law.
Yes.
Relative to the kind of work that he wants to do.
True.
Because he talked to this investigator, and I wonder if this investigator gave you any codified information, right, that tells you the basis for what he's saying. If not, well, that's a red flag to begin with. But understand the law that you're dealing with. And I'm sure Michael sounds like a smart guy. He's probably already done this. But is there anything in there that suggests to you that you can't do the kinds of things that you want to do? If not, then I think you're fine. You just have to be able to, or be aware of the fact that you might have to defend yourself in some way, whether that's in the court system, against some fine, or whatever, because these investigators can be power happy, if you know what I mean. But I guess what I'm saying, because again, he's asking for advice. My advice is make sure you understand what the written law says. And if after doing that, you see no reason to do what this investigator is saying, go about your business. That's how I would look at it. But you got to be willing to take that risk, knowing you might have to spend some money to defend yourself at some point, I guess is another way to say that.
Yeah, but the thing is that this is being done at such scale right now that someone mentioned in this group, they're like, if they were to try to go after all the drone mappers in North Carolina, they would never get to it.
Well, there's that too. So maybe, and so when I say you just have to understand there's some risk of you having to defend yourself, that risk could be small. And based on your comment there, it is small, but it does exist. And so my point is just be aware. And if you add all that stuff up, if I'm you, and the law is very clearly not prohibiting me from doing the kinds of things you need to do, I'm not worrying about it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it either, and I will keep doing it. And if I do anything that draws property lines,
Well, sure.
interprets accuracy,
Yeah.
or is made into an Alta survey, the only people that I'm giving that map to are surveyors
Correct.
who are going to use it and sign off on it.
Exactly.
But if I want to create a model or a map of an area and I want to take a linear measurement to make sure that the guy building the wall didn't screw it up by 6 inches, that's okay for me to do.
Yeah.
And if I want to do a map and get volumes of the aggregate that was brought in to make sure that I wasn't screwed over by some lazy dude having a bad day, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Come and stop me.
Yeah.
Don't actually come and
What he
stop
said.
me because I don't want to deal with this crap. Actually, come and stop me.
No, please don't.
No, don't. It's just funny though because we just did a class in South Carolina and this came up and I said very clearly, I'm like, guys, you cannot interpret accuracy. You cannot write plot lines or property lines or any of that. And there was a North Carolina licensed surveyor in our class this weekend. And he was like, do you guys know how many people we have on our team that go out and collect all the data for the maps and all we do is verify that it was collected properly?
They
We
are not
verify
licensed
the
is what you're saying.
Correct. We verify GPS points, we verify versus historical record, and then licensed surveyors sign off on it and deliver it. And to be honest with you, I find this whole thing astronomically hilarious because if North Carolina and the Surveying Board of North Carolina were to go in the statistics of places like Florida, where they're doing drone mapping literally daily for Alta surveys, they're finding that 3 out of 10 traditional based surveyors or surveys are wrong. And
3
it's
out of
simply
10.
3 out of 10. And it's simply becoming from one of two things that I've been told. And this is now theory that we're getting into. But one is that the surveyor didn't have access to get to a certain boundary of the property and couldn't actually say where the property goes or where the property ends. And then the other thing is that they couldn't find survey markers. And I will say after, visiting multiple jobs in Florida for survey work, and then Texas, and then California, every surveyor I've worked with has minions and lackeys with associate's degrees pulling points with a total station, signing off on it. Mm-hmm. And every one of those surveyors that I just mentioned were in our classes because they're scaling their business up with drones. They are able to map much faster, much more efficiently, and they're finding data points that they couldn't see before. Mm-hmm. So honestly, I find it fascinating that North Carolina Board of Surveying, by going after this individual who is a drone pilot, they should be going after a surveyor, right, who's already doing this stuff without RPLS. If you're going to say that, then how do you expect me or anyone in your state to take panos? Because if he's going to fine the drone pilot for stitching photos together, my ass. You know what? I'm going to go down there and take a photo of your face and I'm going to stitch it together in front of you.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I'm going to take a pano of his face and I'm going to stitch it together. I'm going to make a 3D model out of it and then I'm going to post it online. And I'm not making any historical documentation that's legally based, but everyone will have a beautiful 3D model of this guy's face. I'm just saying.
In other words, it actually speaks volumes that this investigator took it to that level of you can't stitch photos together.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Dude, this is all
Basically,
about some licensed surveyor found out that a drone pilot was providing survey quote-unquote data to someone else, got super pissed off, went protectionist, didn't actually consider lifelong learning and how can I build this into my business and position myself to scale, blah, 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 blah. No, they just pulled the protectionist route. They want to be protected. Help me, help me, help me. I deserve this because I'm licensed.
Or maybe just seek to understand before you attack, right? That's kind of a...
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. We're getting all hardcore about this investigator, but this investigator has actually been super nice and enjoyable to work with, according to
maybe misinformed.
Extremely misinformed.
But
ignorance is bliss.
Not a bad person. Anyways.
He's not a bad person, but at the same time, it makes no sense that if a state actually wants to build their economic value, if they want to increase this industry in vertical, they should be dying to use drones as it increases efficiency, it increases the scale in which they can operate, and overall they'd be doing more business throughout the year. You know what? I'm disgusted because if this investigator is doing his job, it should be all about, look, here, this is safety-based, I'm only making decisions, as we read in there, unless it's health, wealth, or welfare of the community. None of that applies here. Waste of money, waste of time. And if you guys are really focused on building up the surveying industry in North Carolina, which according to your website you are, I'm really confused as to why you would do this. Doesn't seem like it benefits the department as a whole.
Yeah. Well, this is all people related, right? To state the obvious, just need new leadership. The right people to have the right perspectives to create the right avenues for this to improve. It'll happen.
I'm just saying, if I lived in North Carolina, I would get together a group of every drone pilot. I'm sure there's like a North Carolina drone pilots group on Facebook too. And I would literally petition in the front of the surveying board. Then it's going to get the press to show up. Then you can bring up this podcast and that article about how California is changing their laws so they're not specific to the tools being used to acquire data. And I would just blow the whole thing up out of proportion because it's sad, but in America, that's how change and progress is made. Which it's really sad because honestly, that's just a factor of human psychology. But come on, we're an advanced nation. We should know these things and we should be like, okay, we know this is how it happens, so let's make this change. But we're not there yet. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just grateful that you're here listening to me. I want to hear your feedback on this. Michael R. Jones, I've actually been writing to you as we've been recording this.
Love to hear your experiences. If you've had any experiences similar to this or similar issues or been attacked or not attacked, but had issues with investigators from your state or whatever.
It's just so funny because something I noticed out of North Carolina is that government makes a lot of decisions based out of fear. And no decision is a good decision when it's based out of fear. Just saying. On that bombshell, that's going to do it for us today. My name is Paul.
My name is Rob.
And North Carolina, change the damn rules.